very important for people to understand. If they're going to judge the significance of this, they have to understand the plumbing of this whole arrangement. What does the budget mean in the greater scheme of things? So like, let's go through exactly what it means, like how the process is supposed to happen.
Okay,
so
let's do it.
What is supposed to happen is before April 1st of every year. So we're already late. Like we're already late. Like we were late before this actually happened. But you're supposed to release a budget prior to April 1st. And ideally, like we're talking like February, early March, right? From there, what happens is there's an estimate of spending. It's called a main estimate of spending. And then there's an interim supply vote that basically approves 1/4 of the annual spending. 1/4 of the annual spending, okay? From there, what happens is you get a series of supplemental estimates. So you then normally get a supplemental estimate A, that generally happens May or June, okay? And after that supplementary estimate A, you get a full supply bill normally before July 1st. And then basically that's approving the remainder of the spending that theoretically should be in the budget. But the budget is somewhat it's very functional, but it's somewhat symbolic because it actually doesn't authorize the spending. It just lays out, should you vote for the supply bill to authorize the spending. Without the budget, how would you know if it's reasonable or not, right?
Sure.
And so that full supply bill is normally by July 1st, okay? And then let's go through like what actually else happens too. Then there's normally supposed to be a statement of public accounts for the prior year, because keep in mind, the fiscal year for Canada is March 31st. So it's April 1st, starts on April Fool's Day, and goes to March 31st, okay? And so basically you're supposed to get your statement of public accounts by November 1st. And I just hate that that's November 1st. Like if you're a private company, you get 6 months, but the government is supposed to get 7 months. Why? Why are you so special? Like they should be quicker at it, you would think, but that's what it is. Okay. After that public accounts, which is basically the financial statement for the preceding year, now you get a fall economic update for the current year. Okay. That would normally happen prior to January 1st. And just going back to the public statement of accounts, that's the one that, Christy Freeland dropped off, where she resigned, and then the Liberals basically dropped off that, akin to how, someone would drop off an illegitimate child at the fire department, right?
Yes.
That's the one that just landed and started the whole, chaos with the government falling and Trudeau resigning and the whole bit, right?
And we haven't really had a sitting parliament since then. Roughly around that time, our country's been without anybody steering the ship, and we've got, Mark Carney signing executive orders. Sure, okay, that's how it works. 70 billion so far without parliamentary oversight, but hey, who's counting?
He looked very Trumpian in signing those orders, didn't he?
Oh yeah,
he actually looked very, very Trumpian.
He's got to really work on his, his signing so that it looks very Trumpy.
Yes. Okay, so now you get the fall economic update, and normally you're going to get another supplementary estimate B prior to January 1st, okay? And then you get a corresponding supply bill. So there's an estimate and a supply bill, and voting on the supply bill effectively authorizes the spending, okay? And then sometimes there'll be an estimate C in February or March. That's basically, for all intents and purposes, we messed up. We know we're going to come in short, so let's authorize this spending before the end of the year.
We're over budget, folks.
Yeah. So sometimes that one's necessary, and then that's how expenses are actually authorized. So the budget does not authorize the expenses. The budget just is, theoretically, the purpose of the budget is to know, should I actually authorize this spending? Because in absence of the budget, how do I know if this spending is reasonable or not? I don't know how much money is coming in, so how can I decide how much money is going to go out? Right.
Well, I mean, they have access to the money printer. They can just put some numbers on the machine and push send, and boom, there's some money there.
That's right. And then, so other than that, there's really only 3 ways that spending is actually authorized. Okay, so you have an estimate Okay, whether that's a main estimate or a supplementary estimate followed by a supply bill. Okay, that's voted on. Then you have individual items that can be voted on, like when they individually voted on CERB. That was an individual item, basically a piece of legislation and a supply bill all in one. And then you have special warrants, which how we've been authorizing spending now. So those are, pretty much the three ways that you can authorize spending. So the special warrants is supposed to be, we have an immediate need and there's really no way to authorize it by an ordinary vote. So, Prime Minister goes to the Governor General and says, here we go. This is what I want to spend the money on. And, the good old king or queen, this representative, signs off on it for us, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. So those special warrants that you talked about, I'll pull them up on the screen here.
Sure.
So we actually have them. So there was two of them. So the first one was in April, and it was for 40 billy, right? Remember, we always tell people, it's like, if you want to understand the system, you got to get really comfortable with billies and trillies. So 40 billy in spending. And it goes through and like what they're actually spending the 40 billion on. Okay. Go through, you see some of the larger ones. It's like, man, we're going to spend $6 billion on Indigenous relations. And we're going to spend $1.7 billion on Department of Employment and Social Development.
$6 billion on Indigenous relations and Northern affairs, but they still have no clean drinking water on a number of reserves.
And another $6 billion on Department of Indigenous Services.
Wow.
Okay.
Another $6 billion.
$4 billion on defense. Okay. $1.1 billion Department of Works. My personal favorite on these are the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. They're going to get $1.5 million. No budget, but we're going to give them $1.5 million to not deliver a budget.
Perfect.
So
$1.5 billion to not deliver a budget.
It's $1.5 million. It's $1.5 million. But they get another $1.5 million on the next one. So they're up to $3 million, still no budget. So I was joking with Trevor saying, it's like, I could deliver no budget for $2 million. Like a fantastic deal, right? RCMP, it's almost $1 billion. Okay. We have the Treasury Board Secretariat, $1.1 billion. So that's $40 billion. That was the first one. That was the first 40 of the 70. Okay. Then you get number two, and this is where it kind of came to fruition. It's like the first one almost just like, I don't want to say snuck under the radar, but it didn't make as much noise. It was kind of the second one because it was just after the new government was elected, and now you get a second special warrant, basically. So kind of arguably spending without any oversight. And, this one's for $30 billion. Okay. $30 billion. And, similar ones. You get the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation needed $803 million. Interesting. Very interesting. I love some explanatory notes on this, but this is the shortfall with these special warrants. It's like you get line items and not really a whole bunch of budget discussion or explanation other than that. Okay, but the CMHC needed $800 million. Interesting. Wow. I wonder if there were some defaults there, but Correctional Services of Canada, $513 million. Okay. Same thing. Indigenous Relations, $2.2 billion. Department of Employment and Social Development, $5.5 billion. Seems like there might be some EI claims at this point.
Could be, yeah.
Seems like there might be some EI claims.
Because last time we checked, what was unemployment at? 6.9?
6.9. Yep.
Yikes.
So Department of Indigenous Services, $3.3 billion. Department of National Defense, $5.9 billion. Okay. And going all the way down there, $33 billion. So there you go. There's your $73 billion. That's how it's been authorized. Three ways that you can authorize spending in Canada: with an estimate, and then a supply bill, or with a standalone bill, usually on a standalone issue, or a special warrant.
Special warrant.
Special warrant.
This is an emergency, folks. We have to do this so that all these things can keep going. Yeah.
So that is, we have no functioning budget. They touched on it on that article there, and they said the last time we didn't have a budget was 2020, I believe, in that video we just watched.
That's right.
Which is true. There was no budget for 2020. And some people would say that's a terrible idea and we should have had a budget anyways. I would probably agree. You should have a budget anyways. Was it difficult circumstance at that time? I guess so. Difficult circumstances. They did talk about the Paul Martin, I believe, which was in 2002. It was somewhat misleading how that video came off, because they said they didn't have a budget. They actually just delivered it late that year.
Right.
They delivered it late that year. So I was looking back at trying to find the instances to determine the significance of this thing. And it really, 1998 was the only other instance that I could find in any sort of modern history where we didn't have a budget. And it was the same sort of thing where, Chrétien, basically wins the election in and around the budget time, and they skipped the year. Okay. So 2002, it actually did happen. It just happens late, but really in 1998, they skipped it all the way through to 1999.
And before that, I believe it was World War II. We didn't have a budget for like 480 some days.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah, probably. So that's kind of not completely unprecedented, highly unusual. Let's get into how unusual it is, though, because that's the point. It's like, you look at the G7 countries. So the G7 countries: France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US. Okay, and of course Canada. Like these are our peers, so to speak. And one of the reasons will be, it's emergency spending because there's tariffs. Like that's a difficult pill to swallow, because they're all embattled in these tariff wars, right? And every one of the other G7 countries has a budget. Every one of them has a functioning budget that you can access on the government website. Okay. Now, it's not just the G7 countries that have a budget.
Oh, really? Do tell.
It's not just the G7 countries that have a budget. So I'm going to get into some other countries that you may or may not think would have a budget, but do have a budget. Okay. So here's some. Communist China has a budget available on the government website.
Oh.
Communist China. So Mark Carney in Canada, we do not have a budget. Communist China does have a budget publicly available on their website. Okay. Some other countries that do have a budget on their website. Russia. Vladimir Putin, for all his crazy making, he managed to get a budget out there.
Wow, that's incredible. In amongst the bombing of Ukraine, he was able to get his government together to put out a budget. That's wonderful.
Yes.
All right.
That would be another example. The Ukraine.
Shocking.
So in terms of levels of emergencies, it's like we're undergoing some tariff. I'm not going to call it a war. It's a negotiation. We're undergoing a tariff negotiation when we can't have a budget. But the Ukraine is fighting a hot war and they have a budget. So.
Interesting,
right? What are some other examples? Haiti has a budget available on their website.
Does Haiti even have a functioning government right now?
I have no idea who posted this budget, but they have a budget. So
didn't they just have a coup and they're run by some kind of warlord at the moment? Is that
apparently the warlords like budgets? So
they got to know how much they got to spend on blowing hookers and guns and stuff, right?
Crazy. I mean, a few more examples to show you how unusual it is not to have a budget. Sudan, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These are all, whether you like it or not, they're third world countries, embattled in conflicts, and they all have budgets. But it's not my personal favorite.
Oh, what is the personal favorite?
My personal favorite.
Let's do it.
Of dysfunctional countries that are not dysfunctional enough to not have a budget. My personal favorite is the Taliban in Afghanistan have published a budget. So Mark Carney and the Liberals in Canada have not published a budget, but the Taliban in Afghanistan have a functioning budget available publicly on their website. So that's very interesting on showing you the ridiculousness of not having a budget.
Okay? Oh, Canada.
Now,
Canada.
I'll make the balance argument because we learned about this the other day, and I think you were saying, Josh, we don't have a budget. I was like, yeah, my first comment, I think, to you is like, it would be wrong anyways. I mean, last time they missed it by 20 billion. So like, what difference does
Just 20 billion.
That was my first 20-second reaction to it when I found out they didn't have it. I was like, well, I mean, last time they thought they were going to be out, short 40 billion. They ended up being short 60 billion. So how much difference did the budget make anyways?
In comparison to the U.S., that's a rounding error. Like, let's get serious here.
That's right. So that was my first reaction to it. But then, you have some time to reflect on it. It's like, I'm a fractional CFO, and my job is to kind of step back from the craziness and take the 30,000 foot view and decide, where this business or where this household should take their finances. It's like, let's just say this was my assignment tomorrow. And someone said, like, what the heck do you have to do? It's like, okay, we actually have to take a realistic expectation. It's like, they actually didn't know where the money was going. So if someone comes to me and let's just say they have a March year end.
Sure.
They have a March year end, okay? And I know last March of 2024, they totally flew through their budget. They ended up 60 billion out when they should have been 40 billion out, okay? So they totally flew through their budget by, 50% the deficit was higher. Okay. So I actually know that they took forever to deliver the statement. They were late in filing the statement. I mean, kind of what that tells me is functionally they don't have a functional accounting system. So when I actually go in and look at the records, how much confidence do I have in it? If this was a private company and I know that they're in financial disarray, I'm not going to go and issue a budget or a plan based on interim reporting that I think is wrong. It was wrong last year, right? And and when you drill through that budget, like, where did it miss? It basically missed almost $20 billion in what it labeled as a single line item for contingent Indigenous issues, right? Like, it was like, with no explanation, no real depth of it, even though it was like the most significant line item. It's like, a 50-page document, and basically the entire issue is buried in one line item that didn't really give a lot of explanation. So, I have my doubts on it. So, like, if this was a private company, like, if I'm, trying to play devil's advocate on how crazy this is, it's like, I'd actually want to expedite the financial reports before I issue the budget, because I have no idea what my starting point is. So how do I issue a budget when I actually don't know what my starting point is, right? Like, that's just what I think. And there's people out there who say, oh, that's the federal government. They're experts and everything. Like, no, they're not. They missed it by 20 billion last time. Like, I won't trust that starting position until I see that financial report, right? So if I'm actually being fair, like, if I'm actually being like, yeah, I mean, and we look at the order of operations, is those public accounts normally come out before the fall economic update. Normally they do, right? I would actually want to see the public accounts before the fall economic update. Like, I would actually do that. That's the order of operations that I would recommend and do in a private company. But I sure as heck wouldn't wait until September.
Right.
We would expedite that year end. If that year end is March, we would, move heaven and earth to move that year end up. And we're going to not report at the deadline. We're going to report as soon as possible so we can get a real functioning budget in place. Right.
Sure. And, why do you want a budget? Well, a budget, gives you guardrails, how much you should be spending, where you should be spending it. And it gives you accountability, because really it is not their money. It is the money of the Canadian people, right? It's not they just don't get to play around with it and stack it up and do whatever they want, but they do. So we've got no guardrails, we've got no training wheels, we've got no repercussions or accountability. So we kind of need a budget. I would recommend having a budget. I mean, if your household didn't have a budget and you just gave Sandra the credit card, just go crazy, rack them all up.
Knock it out, yeah.
We don't have a magic money printer to just go ahead and cover off that credit card debt.
We don't, but they do.
We don't, but they do, right? So, I mean, I think it's kind of important to have a budget.
Yeah. And so, it's like, really, what will be the order of operations? Like, yeah, it actually does make sense to get the statement of accounts out first and then publish the budget, because you're basically just acknowledging that the former regime had no idea what they're doing, so you have no idea where you're starting from. But I mean, like I said, in a private enterprise, if it was a March year end, we'd be trying to do that year end this month. You know what I mean? We'd be trying to do that year end this month so we can have a budget next month. Like, that's what we'd be trying to do. We wouldn't just, push out a fake budget where we don't actually know the starting position or what happened last year yet, right? So,
and for me, here's the other thing. Okay, so, all right, the people who are responsible for that government at that time, who wildly overshot their budget by 20 billies, right? He hired the same people. It's the same group of people just shuffled around. They shuffled the deck a little bit, but it's the same people. Doing the same thing.
Same bureaucrats.
Same ineptitude, same jackassery that's going to be going on for the next who knows how long. And, here we are. So how do we deal with this?
I mean, what are they going to do? So, functionally, how's this going to happen? So they did the $70 billion of special warrants, but you have to understand, you're talking about an organization that has $500 billion in operating expenditures. Okay, so $70 billion is less than 2 months. They have less than 2 months available, so they're going to have to approve some new spending, and theoretically, they could approve spending with supplementary estimates and supply bills. You don't actually need the budget. I mean, it seems logical that you would have an overall plan before you approve spending, but you actually can have an estimate of spending and then approve it, and it would be binding. That is a way to approve spending. Not ideal, but it would work. And they're going to be forced into something. So it's either going to be approving based on one of the supplementary estimates or producing a main estimate and a supply bill, or a supplementary estimate and a vote, because $70 billion is not going to get them through to fall. It won't. I mean, it's like I said, it's roughly less than 2 months of operating expenditure.
The other scary words that I saw in this whole discussion about not having a budget, I think it was Champagne who said, yes, just like we had said during the campaign, we're going to spend less so we can invest more. So what that gets interpreted in my mind is they're going to be giving out less in, rebates and checks to, the average Canadian, so that they can invest in these, green infrastructure projects that are going to go nowhere. Like, we've got multiple battery plants, EV companies like Honda and so forth who are not building EVs anymore, and we've sunk billions into them as taxpayers. I think it's going to be more of that kind of stuff. So not spending, but investing.
Yes.
That is a lie.
Yes. I mean, borrowing money to invest makes sense, but you have to trust that the person who's actually doing the investing is going to make wise investments and not pet social projects. And so, Paul didn't really actually go down that I'm going to borrow money to invest, because the average conservative, their head would explode if they did that. And it sounded new age for the Liberals to vote on it, but that's what we teach people to do all the time. Borrow fake money to invest in real assets that pay a bigger return than you're going to pay in interest. That is the name of the game, but I have no confidence that. I think they'll make it worse because they'll borrow money so you'll still have the debt, but you won't have the cash flow producing asset, just like the shuttered battery plants, right? That's the likely scenario here.
And don't forget the cricket plant that shut down. We invested billions of dollars into edible crickets, and that's shut down.
That'll fire up again once we're locked in our shipping container homes. So don't worry. that thing still probably has a future for when people need to eat their ration bug paste that we've talked about. But that's the so they're what's going to happen is I actually agree with the order of operations. I totally disagree with the timeline. It's insane. It's but. Yeah, logically, you actually do need a statement of account before you produce a budget, because the budget would just be it would just be so far off. It would be a fictitious document, right?
Sure.
So totally agree with the order of operations, but the timeline's completely unreasonable. You cannot run a country, for 6 months without a budget. That's not a great timeline. But I mean, good luck getting the federal union government employees to work overtime to push out that statement of account early, right? That's a private industry solution that I would think of, right? Let's just do the year end this month, and let's get a plan next month, right?
Yeah.